I'd like to call this meeting of the Lambertsville Facilities Committee to order at 6:32. Roll call, please.
David Pombo,
Here.
Colin Clements,
Here.
Jimmy LeGrand.
Here.
Thorsten Harrison,
Here.
Erica Smith Payne,
Absent.
Lisa Boulay.
Here.
Receiving of public comments. Would you like to speak now or wait until we're? All right. Facilities use update, facility use minutes from 7/27/17. Questions, comments, or corrections to the minutes?
And I think these minutes have already been presented to the full governing board at a prior board meeting.
So then it's too late to change them.
Yes.
Finance report.
Included on page 414 of your packet. And as I mentioned at the last meeting, we were going to change it and move the ending balance to now become the beginning balance. And you can see the amount of revenue and expenditures that have been paid out to date as of this report. We have a total balance of $116,000 currently in that account. And prior to the supplemental payroll that may hit some of these accounts, these expense accounts.
Questions or comments by the committee?
None here.
Facility usage report from 7/28/17 to 9/22/17.
Those reports are pages 5 through 11. You'll notice the reports are broken out a little bit more by school now and by usage, color-coded by what tier was used for each facility.
Yeah, I noticed that. That's a very visual representation. I like that.
Bethany came out grayscale.
I don't have any questions on the usage.
Questions or comments by anyone on the committee on the usage report?
None.
Denied applications, list attached, page 12.
Looks like the vast majority of them were accommodated elsewhere as expected.
Yep.
Moving on to item E, reimbursements to organizations, list attached, page 13. A couple of security deposits were returned. Information and discussion items, application for window from November 2017. Staff report?
So I have met with all of the principals and informed them that they need to go in and reserve any facility use from October on. I think that's been done. So if this group could come to a consensus on a date to set for opening the window for the community, then we can move forward with that.
Is there a recommendation from staff for what that date should or could be?
I liked October 15th. October 15th. And then we'll open up for the rest of the year. Does that work?
Sounds good to me.
The rest of the year through the end of school or through the fiscal year or through just the end of this year?
Through the end of school is how we
The school year?
how we
Okay.
traditionally do it, yes.
Okay.
Okay?
Item B, list of parental projects potential projects using fees. Staff report?
So it was requested that I go back and talk to some of the principals and talk to folks about what kind of projects that we could use at our school sites for the monies that we collect. Some of the feedback I've received so far is new curtains and/or runners in the MPRs, which makes sense since the MPRs are used probably the most out of any of the facilities besides the fields. We could use a new scoreboard at one or two of the sites inside the MPR. Microphone use, I know that there has been some concern from the community about being able to use a microphone. Maybe we could purchase a microphone that could be used by community and have one that's used by the school. That's up to this group. And resurface the floors in the MPRs. We could also do some work on some of the sports fields. Some of them could use a little bit of attention. We could purchase mobile soccer goals. A couple of our schools have multiple grass areas where you could actually have soccer on more than one field. Baseball hoop nets, refurbishing the backstops, the softball and baseball backstops. Some of them are at the point where they could use some refurbishing, some touch-up, and maybe some, care. So that's the list that I've come up with. I still have a couple more principals to get input from, but I imagine this is pretty common between them.
I know this is an obvious question, like I should totally know this, but I'm thinking through the multipurpose rooms, curtains?
The stages.
Oh, the
Remember they all
curtain in
have-
front of the stage.
Yes.
Okay, I'm thinking window curtains going,
Oh, no.
what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All of the stuff that you mentioned seemed like reasonable wear and tear because of increased use type items, so it would be an appropriate use of fees to me.
And I like all the ideas. I especially like the idea of the sound systems because I know a lot of groups want to use them. I know the schools, understandably so, are reluctant to allow them to use them because they need them. But if we had a set for the public to use, we could charge a nominal rental fee on those items if they request them. And that way, if they tear them up or whatever, the schools aren't without.
It'd be nice to have a simple sound system for public use, an on-off button, some speakers to go with it. Because I know we have a upgraded one at Wicklund for the drama department, and it's pretty complicated. So something simple.
One of the things that is going on that's a part of the tech plan is all of the MPRs are getting updated sound systems and updated projectors for the facilities. So it might behoove us to buy a simpler microphone, lock our stuff away, but have a simpler system for people using it. Maybe something tough system like that's used outside or something like that.
Yeah,
Okay. Would you like me to add that to the list?
sure.
Okay.
Further discussion by the committee? Item C, fee review for youth versus adult usage. Staff report?
Jimmy?
So I talked to 5 or 6 different districts, and none of them charge extra fees for adult groups. So the way we currently have it set up is if they're a nonprofit group, they get charged Tier 3 rates. If they're associated with some nonprofit group, they're Tier 2A or B. I don't see any reason to change that moving forward, unless you guys want to change it. But no district that I could find is charging extra fees for adult groups to use their facilities.
I'm reluctant to keep adding tiers and things, but if there was a simple way to give youth groups a preferential treatment over adult groups, I think since we're talking about school district facilities and therefore our youth, something like that might be good to look into. I'm not sure what that would look like. And as I said, I hate to keep adding tiers and layers
wanna
and
do that
levels,
either.
but if there's some way that we could do that, it might be might be a good idea, I'm not sure.
We kind of have that built in now because normally youth group would probably be a nonprofit group, not necessarily, but most of the time. So there is, they would get preference treatment over tier 3, but
And if there's any conflicts in the calendar, wouldn't they come back to this meeting anyway? And then we could make that decision here instead of creating more policy and more paperwork?
That's true.
When you say conflict in the calendar, though, that would be where we've accepted to at the same time, because it's first come, first serve, and it's not like we hold off accepting reservations from like an adult group waiting for a child group. So, we do provide the preferential treatment is the lower fees for the not-for-profits, which are most of the kid organizations are. The reason we started this conversation in terms of adults is I think it was pretty much targeted towards the increased wear and tear on the fields because, a bunch of adults playing flag football has a completely different toll on the grass than, a bunch of children. But if there really isn't a way to, if it's too complex, then it is what it is. It's not like there's a ton of adult organizations that are playing, and if it becomes where it's maybe 50-50, there's as many adults playing as kids, then we can reevaluate it at that time.
Yeah, and if I recall correctly, what we were talking about was an organization that was using one of our school fields because the CSD park that they had been using was under renovation or
So it
something.
was temporary.
So, as Director Clements said, this is something that we can revisit if and when it seems to be causing an issue.
But at least now we can say we considered it and we thought about it and.
Yeah.
I think we have a public comment,
hold
Mr.
on.
Chairman.
Hey, sorry. Hey, thank you. I was just going to say, I think Colin covered a portion of that, but I think that modifying the fees for adults is probably more headache than it's worth. Just because how do you determine if Mountain House Flag Football, a clearly youth-based organization, when they submit their ticket, is going for an all game or a youth game? Plus, publicity-wise, it's going to play terribly. So I'd think about that, but it sounds like you guys did and decided against it, so that's good.
Thank you. Item D, Mountain House High School Theater, staff report.
So I was asked to do some research on theater use policies in the area. So what I did is I went to a number of different school district websites and to their facilities use page for their theaters, both in the valley and then just over the hill in Livermore and Pleasanton. And I found a lot of interesting information, and I'm going to kind of give you a thumbnail sketch of what I found. Insurance is anywhere from $100,000 to $1 million or to $2 million of liability, as well as $50,000 up to $1 million in property damage insurance, along with a significant deposit in many of these facilities. And I think the differentiation in a lot of the facilities is the age of the facility and how fancy the facility is. Because when I started looking at pictures of some of the facilities that had $2 million in liability, it was a pretty fancy facility. Some of the districts require individual users to go through a mandatory training with a fee attached to that training. So if they are going to use the facility to put on a professional play or whatever the case may be, they're required to have training on the soundboard, training on the lights, training on all facets of use of the theater prior to being able to even rent the facility. And then some of the districts use district personnel to perform a variety of roles. For one, there's always a custodial fee, and it's always at least 1 hour prior and 1 hour after the event. In some cases, it's 3 and 3, depending on the theater. There's usually a soundboard operator and sometimes a lighting technician that the people using the facility have to pay for in order to use the facility for like a full, play or something of that type. Some districts also have a theater manager, and the theater manager meets with groups who are going to rent. They give training, they give direction, and they are actually, in some cases, they're a part of the fee. In some cases, they are required to be at the event as well, kind of like making sure that they know how to do everything. If there's a problem, they can help fix it, and probably also to watch the stuff so nothing gets broken. There are different levels of use at some of the facilities. So at some of the facilities, if it's a full-blown production, they're required to have sight, light, sound, etc. In some cases where it's just a community movie night or showing something from a projector, the fees are different, and the requirement to have a technician is a little different. For student events, obviously these are all waived. For like drama production, that's all waived, and usually there's no fees for drama productions that the school puts on because they take care of their own business there. There were a variety of documents I looked at. One district had a one-page facilities document. The other had 25-page booklet. So it's all over the spectrum. Now, I don't think that we need a 25-page booklet, but I walked the theater the other day, and it's going to be a fantastic facility, so I think we need to do everything we can to protect it. In my research, I think that we should have all of our procedures in place, who our staff are going to be, and what we're going to charge, et cetera, well before we even think of renting the facility. My advice, I think moving forward, Mr. Faubert and I should get together and create a document to bring back to this group to look at and approve or make changes to moving forward.
I definitely like the idea of the training for anybody who's going to use the facility. And do you have a handle on everything that's going to be in there, or will we need the drama teacher to help out with that and give, because I do imagine there's going to be different tiers depending on which capabilities whoever's renting it is looking for.
Right, so we are still getting a handle on what's going to be in there. We know that there's a very expensive LED lighting system that comes with electronic iPad controls and a sound system that's fairly, technologically advanced, and I'm sure computers that will control lighting and sound. So we need to get a handle on what it is ourselves. I think in a prior meeting, I mentioned that we might want to hold off on renting the facility at least for 6 months so that our own people, number one, can move in. It's going to be turned over to us in December. So we've got to move in, and then January we'll just be getting used to the classrooms and what's going on. And then we're putting our own shows on in the spring, including music and drama productions, and that will give us a good handle on what's there, how to use it. And then once we have that, I think that we could talk about, what should be the procedure moving forward. I don't know that we'd be ready to have, I don't think we should be, this is just my opinion, I think we should wait for that first semester until the first semester is over to kind of look and see what's there, how it works, and then put together some sort of plan for how it should be rented out. And I do believe that there should be different prices. Like if you're just coming in and you want the house lights on and some just main lights on the stage, and you're not like turning on and off and turning lights and doing different kinds of sound. If it's just everything's on and you want to use it, then that's a different price than I want to run a full production. I want the lights to be moved. I want different scenes, different, things like that. So not a 25-pager, but maybe like a 10 to 15-pager that kind of shows, tells the different types of usage in the building, the different types of things that people are going to request, and then making a decision about whether we're going to have our own people running that or whether we're going to allow people to be trained on that equipment. So that's my 2 cents in that.
No.
I think probably, sounds like we'll probably end up with kind of a cafeteria approach to it, where if you want the stage and the seats, it's one price. If you want, this level of amenities, it's this price and so on and so forth. I agree that probably a minimum of 6 months to get used to what it is, look at what we have and who's going to run it and how it's going to be run and what we're going to charge and all those things. I know we touched on it in a previous meeting, but I'm still interested to know what the exact rules are for having students working in,
We have done some.
So we have.
research.
So our person who does work permits and things like that has already done some research on that. The students are not in the work permit world allowed to work on catwalks and things like that as a job, but they are absolutely allowed to do this very same thing when it's a school production. So there's a big difference between the permissions for minors to work in an environment and get paid for the same kind of work that they might do in an educational atmosphere.
And I'm guessing that this is a gray area perhaps, but if it's a work experience or some such thing where they're not being paid, but the school is, or the district is renting the facility out to a third party for a production of some sort, but the students are not being paid, they're just working in
part of their
work
schooling.
experience or
Yeah.
school-related.
As long as it's not, in other words, we could not employ students at the district level as, go through the process of employing a student, because you can employ students in the district. They can do things like work for the cafeteria, can do other things. But we cannot, the state of California will not allow us to approve a work permit for a student who would be, say, climbing up on the catwalks. There are laws. I mean, students are not even allowed to be sign waivers on streets. It's that restrictive when it comes to the safety of minors in jobs. So you can imagine being up on a catwalk is a lot more dangerous than standing on a street waving a sign. But absolutely, if it was part of a work experience program, they were not an employee that the district was paying and getting a work permit for, because it's part of their schooling, that's a school activity, then that falls underneath schooling as opposed to employment.
And as far as a safety issue, I would think that a student who is on the catwalk on a regular basis, working whatever they work from the catwalk, would be much safer than a third-party individual
Absolutely.
coming on to our campus
Right,
that doesn't
because
know
they've
how
been doing
anything
training,
works.
they know how to wear the harnesses that they've got to have on and to work the equipment so that we don't have somebody getting up there going, I don't need a harness on, I'm just going to get up there and, oops, I fell off.
I agree with basically all that. And to be honest, I'm okay. We've discussed in the past things like the sound room with all that technology, saying that it has to be district personnel or students if students are trained to do that. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with, I agree with if you're gonna do some of the other stuff, and if, let's say we do decide we're going to allow organizations to be using the sound room, obviously if we said that, then the training is gonna be required. And we have to train ourselves before we can train others. So day one, we are not in a position to do a lot of things. So the reality is there will be a build-up time, a organizational time. However, I do not want, what it'll take is a vote of this board to say, we're going to say no for 6 months. I would much rather say, look, you can ask and we'll consider it, but the presumption's going to be no. But I don't want to say no, and I'm using a ridiculous example just to show you where I'm coming from. Let's say a firefighter has a wreck and they want to do a memoriam and a presentation, and all they want is the lights, and that's 3 months after our theater is open, and we've got a policy, Facebook is going to light up because we got a policy that says they can't use it. So I'm like, look, we say as an organization, look, we've got to have some ramp up time. We've got, we need to understand how to use this facility before we can let other people and teach them how to use it. So the presumption's going to be, for the first 6 months at least, the answer's probably going to be no, but we don't want to say no for everything. If you have something that you believe is a reasonable request, bring it to us in the first 6 months and we'll consider it. That way, we haven't said no. We've said, look, if you think it's a reasonable request, by all means, bring it to us. But by the way, it's probably going to be no. That's where I'm coming from on that.
That sounds reasonable to me. I do like the idea. Go ahead.
I'm just going to throw my 2 cents, and to those who know me, I do run a sound and lighting production company. I agree with Colin as far as there's certain things, but what you really want to be careful of is, and I've worked on the Questa system and the previous system, it's about as simple as it gets, but guaranteed almost every Monday morning, it's not working because of people using it on the weekends. We just upgraded our Questa stage as well, and we're having the same thing. It's, are we going to let people use this, and then when we want to use it, have to troubleshoot everything that went wrong with the last person? I strongly suggest with this theater, and if you're talking a state-of-the-art, even if someone's trained on one sound system and one lighting system, ours is not going to be the same. The person that's hooking things up, they're going to say, oh, well, something went wrong and I had to switch this with this. And maybe they never wrote it on the board, or they didn't. There's so many things that can go wrong. I would strongly suggest on hiring and requiring someone to rent a person that knows the sound system and another person that knows the lighting system, and do not let, I would not let anyone touch that equipment, because you're talking about, and you can sell it as, listen, your organization, I know it costs you X amount of money, but you're going to save that time not having to troubleshoot and figure out what's going on. You can have our person do it, and I think you don't run into any difficulties. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and that would be my inclination, and I won't speak for the rest of the committee, but I think that's probably everyone's inclination, is we should have either district employees or students who've been trained and know the system well running it, and that's it. And I do like the idea of that Director Harrison or Associate Superintendent Harrison spoke about, and that is having someone there, whether it's the head of the drama department or some other person who's the theater is their baby, that goes through and makes sure everything is the way it should be before a group leaves for the night, because there's so much stuff in there that, great, they have insurance, but if we don't see what happened until after the fact, then it just turns into a lot of issues, I think.
If I can speak, I would agree.
Sure.
I would agree that I know there's other places where you have to go through some training to use it. My preference would be, and again, this body can make a different choice. My preference would definitely be that there are so many moving parts to a theater, down to the little teeny mic that somebody puts tapes on their head for the show, and all the way up to really big things like tools and dangerous things that people can whack their fingers off with. And just so many moving pieces that if you do not have somebody there who is familiar with the whole thing, things walk away, people get hurt, somebody can't figure out how to make something work, so they unplug something and plug their own thing in, they overload a circuit, they blow a speaker, they do this, that, or the other, and then it's, and you don't find out until months later, and then you go, gee, when did that get broken? And you don't even know whether it was your fault or not. I would rather have it be our own people. That way we know if it's broken, well, we were the ones running it. It must have been our fault, and we move forward. But yeah, it's a sticky one because of and I've been in there a couple of times too. It's a beautiful, beautiful facility. I haven't seen a high school facility like it anywhere in the state. So it's going to be, actually El Capitan High School has one that's really nice. They're just a year older than we are, but it's similar to that, and it's just going to be something we want to keep nice for a long time. And if we open it and just let other people do it, it will get ruined.
Yeah.
I think that like I think no, but I think most of the board, the committee is there's a spectrum, and on one end of the spectrum is you flip the light switch, when you walk in the door, and on the other end of the spectrum is you're running the strobes and the sounds and all this in the sound room. And I think that everybody on the committee is like, well, it's probably okay if they turn on the lights themselves, and we're pretty sure it's not okay for them to be running the tech and all this, which means there's a line somewhere in that spectrum that's, if it's on this side of the line, we could probably work out something and let, and on this side, no. And I know for myself, I'm looking to district staff to tell me where that line should be.
Yeah, and I think that everything on they can do it themselves side of the line should have training included with it, so they know how to do it themselves, and everything else is just, no, this is off limits. We're going to have somebody doing it. Tell us how you want it done, and we'll
Right.
turn the lights how you want, or the sound how you want, or whatever, but we're going to be the ones doing it.
And I think that line's not going to be identified until they get in there and start working with it and
I
working
agree
with
with
the
that.
kids and figuring out what they have, how to use it, how simple some of the things are. So I do think that that's going to take some time. An
I agree with
undetermined
all
amount
that.
of time. I don't think we need to I think you're right. I don't think we need to put a specific time. It can be worded such that, until our staff is trained and comfortable and we have developed a policy. And so there's no time limit. It's just kind of when the work gets done.
And I'll be the first to say, I'm a resident here too. I want the theater open in the summers for workshops and plays and community theater and all that. Even during the school year, I'd love to see stuff like that happen. And I'd love to see our elementary schools come and perform with their groups in the theater as well to be able to use it. But you're right. I mean, I don't want to put a time limit on it, because it may be 3 months and we go, hey, we get it. We know how to use it. We're comfortable. We're ready for people to come in. But I don't know that. We have no idea. When you go in right now, it looks super complicated because there's wires everywhere and rigging everywhere, and you don't know until you know. And I think it'll take us a while. We have a great drama teacher who's very experienced. Usually it's the drama guys, not the music guys, who are going to be most knowledgeable about what goes on in the theater. Our drama teacher has connections with other people in the drama world. He's bringing programs to our town already. And so he's got connections with other people that will be able to help us and say, hey, this is how this is going to work. And it could be short. It could be a little bit longer amount of time. But I would imagine that by at least the start of next year, we'd be ready to say, okay, we've got a plan. And possibly by the summertime, I don't know. It just depends.
Further discussion? Item E, violation of facilities use agreement notification letter. Staff report?
So I added this because when we have violations, Mr. LeGrand or myself sit down and meet with the individuals to kind of tell them what the violation was, what the proper procedure is. In my opinion, a conversation is not enough of documentation, because if it isn't written down, it didn't happen. I would like to use a form like is in the packet to put it in writing what occurred. And as you can see, it's very simple. On such and such, you request the use of whichever facility at whatever school. It's blank, obviously, and we put the event in that blank. And then it reads, during your use at Lambertville Unified School District facilities, a violation of the facilities use agreement occurred. And then in that blank, we fill in what the specific violation was. And then you can see at the end, it says this notification that in the future you are to follow the facilities use agreement. If you have questions regarding the use of this, they can contact me and I can clarify. I think having something in writing is important, especially as we have more and more facilities, more use. So that's,
I wonder if adding some verbiage in there, something to the effect, further or continued or repeated violations may or will result in loss of privileges.
loss of
or
use.
something like that.
Okay, yeah, I can do that.
Can you also, when I was looking at this, that was one of my suggestions was to add what the violation was, because just looking at the skeleton form of the letter, it doesn't say specifically that it's going to include the violation. So
Yes.
if you just add a simple bullet saying your violation was,
Yeah, I could do
then-
like a grayed out, so it shows that it's fillable. This is a fillable
Yeah.
document that we're just gonna fill in, so
Okay.
yeah, I can add that to it, so it shows like that.
and then if it's somebody else that happens to be filling out the form, then they'll be sure not to miss that bullet.
Insert violation here.
Yeah, something like that,
Yeah,
yeah.
I guess we could do that, actually.
It does
Yeah.
help that when
Yeah,
you
right below them in here.
hover over those sections, it tells you what goes there. This is-
Okay.
It's a
It-
fillable PDF.
Okay,
But when it prints out, it doesn't show that, but on the actual PDF, it does.
okay.
And this letter would not be just sent to somebody because there's a violation. One of the two of us will meet with the individuals first and make sure we have face-to-face contact and say, hey, this is what occurred and this is why it can't occur. And then this is just a follow-up in writing so that there's evidence that we had the meeting.
Okay.
Then, that being the case, I would also recommend that you, if this letter is a follow-on letter after the meeting, I would say, as discussed in our meeting on, and refer back to it so that you're not only documenting the infraction, but that this was communicated with the organization.
Okay? All right.
Yeah, that way they can't say, well, we got this letter and didn't know what it was about, or something, well, you knew what it was about because we had already told you what it was about before we sent you the letter.
Right, okay. I'll make those changes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item F, use of alcohol during facility use. Staff report?
So I was asked to do, I did a lot of research the past month. I was asked to do some research on this board policy in AR 1330. Alvina's going to start by talking about what information we received from our insurance. And then I'll give you some anecdotal information that I found doing some research.
So this topic has been discussed before. I went back to review my notes. I did speak to Keenan and Associates, and obviously there's events that happen, whether a school sponsors an event, or in this case, an organization for facility use. So I'm going to speak to the organization for facility use. Per our insurance wouldn't extend to an organization that uses the facilities. It's their responsibility to have a certificate of insurance. Their recommendation would be that they include a liquor liability to their policy. I don't know what the cost would be for that. I know all our foundations and booster groups file their certificates of insurance, but I'm sure they don't include a liquor liability.
No, they get an event-specific, it's a 24-hour policy to
Right.
cover consumption of alcohol at an event.
And it would be, I believe, similar to what you get from the ABC for a 24-hour liquor license. You would have a 24-hour coverage for.
Right, and that's what they did mention. Also, a recommendation about liquor liability is to have a vendor that provides it for the foundation versus the foundation's providing the alcohol, because then that liability would not fall on the organization, but would fall on the vendor that they hire to provide the alcohol. In review of the policies and administrative regulations, we would need to revise our administrative regulation 1330. We have a board policy 4020, and 4020 is titled the Drug and Alcohol-Free Workplace. It also talks about, in addition, an employee shall not use or be under the influence of any alcoholic beverage or controlled substance as defined in 21 USC 812 while on duty, on district property, or at a district-related activity or event. Then I have Board Policy 5131.6, which is for students, I know. There's a section in the Board Policy 5131.6 for students that says, as far as enforcement and discipline, the superintendent or designee shall take appropriate action to eliminate possession, use, or sale of alcohol and other drugs and related paraphernalia on school grounds or at school-sponsored activities. So once the district allows an organization to use the facilities and approves that, these are some of the areas that we would have to go back and revisit to make adjustments. And then our facility use handbook has in multiple locations that we do not allow alcohol on the premises. So that would also require an amendment.
And then what I did is I talked to a number of school districts and did some research in a number of school districts in the valley here. I communicated with Oakdale, Riverbank, Ripon, Tracy, Liberty, Manteca, and Waterford. All of those schools do not allow alcohol to be served on any district grounds. I really wanted to go to school districts that were kind of shaped like us, you know, and had kind of that, they're a little far from the city center. I did talk to Patterson Unified Superintendent Phil Alfano. They do allow alcohol, but limited use. And what he indicated is they allow alcohol use in 3 areas: the football stadium, the Rising Sun, which is a CTE center, and a professional development center. They only allow beer and wine. They require security at the event as a part of the contract. And they only allow nonprofits and service groups who benefit the youth of Patterson. They're the only groups that they allow to do events like that serve alcohol. And they have updated their board policy to indicate such. So that's what I found.
Discussion?
I think one of the differences between the districts that you have interviewed and our district, and I think our district is the most unique in that we have absolutely no other gathering facilities to hold an event. We would have to leave town, and I think that's what makes us very different than probably any other district in the country. Yeah. And I think this is where the issue comes up, and that if we were to have that benefit, I think that we could certainly start offering it on a limited availability, see how it goes. With some of the requirements that Patterson had, I think are good requirements. But I think it would benefit definitely our school foundations. They wouldn't have to pay the thousands of dollars to go to another facility. All that money that was raised at a fundraiser could go right back to the kids and the programs at our school sites.
I liked some of the stuff that I heard that Patterson was doing. If we did it, I think I would probably feel like limiting it to organizations, or actually, no, not events that are benefiting. You know, if it's geared towards raising money for students, then as opposed to some other not-for-profit organization, I'd have to think about that one more, but I'm kind of leaning that way. However, this information is not enough for me to feel like I can go to the board, or that this committee can go to the board with an actual recommendation one way or the other. Mr. Chairman, I did hear something today that does concern me. The board policy about employee consumption of alcohol, I think, not sure, but I think board members are employees. I mean, we get a W-2 at the end of the year. It's not a 1099, it's a W-2. And events related to the district would be CSBA conferences and stuff. And granted, you know, if I buy a bottle of wine, you know, I pay for it myself, but I'm still, so I would like for that board policy to be referred to Dr. Nicholas. I would like guidance on that.
I think I would also share that with our insurance company, just to get their feedback. I don't know if it requires an attorney to review that, because there's so many conferences and workshops for all employees that they attend, that how is that worded? Does that refer to
Yeah.
school premises?
Yeah, I'm not saying that I'm doing anything wrong by having a glass of wine with dinner at a reception at a CSBA conference, because it doesn't cost the district any money.
Oh.
I'm just saying that if it violates policy, we probably need to change the policy.
Well, you brought up a lot of interesting points. One point is, I don't believe that board members are employees of the district per se. We do get W-2s. Myself and my accountant both believe that is not what we should be getting, that we should be getting 1099s. I haven't fought it because it's not enough money.
Myself and my accountant, which is also me, agree with that.
But, and even if we are employees, I think we're employees of San Joaquin County Office of Ed, not Lammersville Unified, because that's who cuts us
That's true.
checks. But in any event, I don't think we're employees of either. Actually, I believe we are, we should be getting 1099s rather than,
So a little clarity, because I mean, I don't think I'm doing anything wrong, or, you know, like, I read that and I went, okay.
and, you know, that would extend, I would guess, if, depending on how broadly you looked at that, to anyone who is related, is an employee of the schools, who goes to a foundation dinner or,
Like Dr. Nicholas or.
Right.
Or.
or the principal of the school.
Principal of the school.
Teachers at the school who
Right.
sometimes go. So I'm not sure that, yeah, when Ben goes to things that,
Well, maybe not the principal of the high school.
I think that coming up with well, and I hate to put more on your plate, Assistant Superintendent Harrison, but I think we need more information before we can come up with a proposed policy to take to the board. I do like the idea of limiting it to youth-centered or youth groups that are nonprofits that benefit the youth of our community. I don't want to see some promoter coming and renting one of our NPRs to have a rave because we said they can do it. I'm also not opposed to limiting it to certain facilities, whether it's all the NPRs or only certain NPRs, depending on, you know, there may be reasons why we don't want to open it up to everywhere. Maybe we want to start out with the high school NPR and try it there for a while and see how it works. You know, whatever the proposed policy is, try it for a while, maybe, and this committee and the board will have, whatever the policy is, will have full discretion over who and how many and all of that stuff, so we can tell the foundations, you can have one event per year, and we'll see if that works, and, you know, see how that goes. But I believe we need a little bit more, well, I would like to, for one thing, I would like to see Patterson's policy and see how it reads, because the reading of a policy and the implementation of a policy aren't always the same thing. You can have a policy that's wide open and then girdle it down to whatever the decision makers decide it is.
Would it be appropriate or to maybe have a workshop because I don't like the idea of telling the district, bring me a rock. And then
Yeah.
they bring you a rock, that rock's too big, and that rock's too small, and that rock's black, and that rock's orange. Would a workshop where we just kind of talk through, you bring the policies, we talk through it, you know, can we do something like that where it's just an open dialogue rather than have them bring us, you know, a fully, you know, because, you know, they bring us a policy that they think is great and then we shoot it down and they, you know, because what we end up with has to be either we don't recommend taking this to the board or we do recommend taking this to the board. And I'm feeling like maybe a workshop that's specifically geared to that might be appropriate, but I don't know.
Yeah, I can't think of any reason why a workshop wouldn't be appropriate to this moving forward. Maybe have a little, you know, the policy and a little more information. And if anybody, including community members, can come up with any input that they want to, you know, if they can say, well, I know there's a school district in Southern California, this and this and this, and this is what their policy is. Because if we have, you know, as I said, I hate to keep piling stuff on Dr. Harrison's plate, but if people out there can do some research and come up with districts that are doing it, districts where it worked, those sorts of ideas, it would streamline the whole process, I would think.
And if we give enough notice to the public about that we're having this workshop, to say, look, don't come to this workshop with, well, you know, Outer Mongolia, you know, the elementary school district of Outer Mongolia has a policy. Go get the policy and bring it so that we can talk, you know, so that we can see it. Because just, you know, saying, go find this doesn't really help.
Yeah.
You know, so if you have an idea, bring the idea.
And preferably in advance of a workshop, if people would send
Send it
those
in.
things to committee members or the district office and say, this is a policy I've found, then it can be vetted so that we know it's a policy that's still in force and still in effect, and they didn't try it for 2 months and say, you know what, this isn't working, we gotta chuck it, and, you know, maybe we can hammer something out that, and,
Or at least the 80-20 rule, we might be able to get 80% there,
Yeah.
right?
yeah.
Would that help district staff if we did something like that?
Well, let me clarify, if you wouldn't mind. So you're asking for a workshop that would kind of define our policies as they currently exist, right? That Alvina noted. And then also more information about school districts that do allow alcohol on facility grounds and what their policies look like, including Patterson's. That's what you're asking for? Yes.
So,
And then could we
and if-
start
if the-
outlining a potential policy that we can bring to the board for approval? Because I think before the board, the full board is going to even consider approving something, I think we need to have something pretty well established before we say,
Yeah,
hey, we
well,
got this idea.
My thought would be that we would probably have this workshop and have the public bringing in potential policies or ideas or whatever, staff, we hammer something out, and then staff would come back from that, come back with a potential policy that we would discuss at this committee, and then move forward with a recommendation one way or the other to the board. I'm still not certain that this committee will forward a recommendation to the board that says, yes, this is a policy we recommend. We may say, we've looked at all the possibilities, and we don't see a policy that, or a way to fashion a policy that we're comfortable with, and that will be the way that goes. But I would like to have as much information as we can possibly gather to make an informed decision and
yeah, to be clear, my suggestion was not that district staff come to this workshop with, you know, with something prepared, but rather you forward. So what you've already found, you forward. Anything that the community wants to be discussed or has an idea or whatever, they forward, and that the members, the people that are going to be in the workshop, read through that and that we can come informed. So it's not you get ready for the workshop, it's you send everything to us so that we can get ready and we can kind of dial in our thoughts, and that we can kind of get 80% there, maybe get 8, or maybe we look at it and go, you know what, from what we see, we don't see that we can get to a recommendable policy, and that's where it ends. But so I'm not talking about you leading the discussion. I'm talking about you sending information that you find and letting us and giving us enough time to read it. And I will read it in advance. I do that. And that we come prepared to discuss what a policy might look like. And we might have 5 different opinions and we might never get to a consensus. But I think that's going to be easier than asking you to bring us a rock.
Thank you. Okay.
Is that
Yes.
sound reasonable?
Yes. We can do that.
And if it doesn't work, then we've only wasted a couple of hours as opposed to asking you to bring us a rock and we've wasted 8 or 10 hours of your time.
Well, I think if I can find a couple of policies, not just Patterson, but some other school districts, 2 or 3 samples, we should be able to glean from that good information on what may or may not work for us.
I do have a suggestion.
Yes.
And that is that the idea of alcohol on campus is very new in the state of California. It is not new in the state of Texas. And I'm just pulling Texas out. What I'm saying is, let's not learn from the relative infants at this.
Yes.
Do not limit your focus to California. If there's a district that has been doing this for 100 years in Texas, maybe they've got and granted, the rules are going to be a little different for the state of California, but if they've got a policy that works,
Okay.
The policy would have to be tailored to fit California Ed Code and state law and all the rest of it, but there may be some ideas that we can at least.
right, the general risk
Not
is the same.
reinvent the wheel.
Right.
And I just wanted to point out, as I mentioned, it isn't just a single policy that would eventually, I was finding various policies or admin regulations that may be affected by that decision.
Understood.
And as we kind of alluded to, maybe some of those policies need to be looked at or clarified regardless of where this policy may go.
Okay.
Further discussion? Any comments from the public? Moving on to action item 6. I see nothing there. Are there no action items? All right, future agenda topics and meeting date. We've got tier fee structures and Mountain House High School Theater. I believe that the high school theater is probably going to be an ongoing topic of discussion with this committee for the foreseeable future. I would like to add an agenda topic, and we could have done it tonight, but it's not on the agenda, and that would just be an update from Principal Faubert on the track usage and availability and that kind of stuff, just to see where we are, because that was a big topic of discussion not too awfully long ago, and it's just like to see where we are with it as far as.
You said future or no?
That's a future.
Future item.
It's probably better to put it on a future agenda because it's not on this agenda, and that way, if people are interested, they can come when it's on the agenda.
I do have a suggestion on the theater, because I found Ben's discussion persuasive tonight, and I'd already felt like we got to train ourselves before we can train anyone else. We're going to have to know the theater before we can really know a policy. So I'm comfortable as a committee person saying, you know what, the next time we discuss theater, unless somebody brings a recommendation, I'm still saying an application, I'm still saying if you in January decide that you want to hold an event, put in an application. We will probably deny it, but put in an application. But I don't think we need to come back and discuss this until Ben's team has had time to roll up their sleeves and understand the facility. I think we've learned that it's technical enough and there's enough dollars involved in that theater that I don't think we need to discuss this until 2 or 3 months after we take ownership, take possession of the theater at the very earliest. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know that it needs to be on our next agenda necessarily. It may be, there may be something that staff or Principal Faubert want to bring up, a suggestion of something that we put into the policy when we get to the policy, or those sorts of things, but
I know at the very least, I think that we're going to be getting some information about what. So maybe we can just do an update of, because the builder's going to be giving us some information about the actual specs of the stuff that's going in there. So maybe if you want, next time we can just bring a report of, here's what's going in the facility. This is what we know what's going in. So we can start thinking about,
yeah. And,
about that.
and we can have an item on the next agenda that's just Mountain House High School Theater. And if you want to, bring an update of what the equipment is and that sort of thing, if anybody has questions or suggestions from the committee as far as, policy suggestions or whatever, we can cover it
Entertain
at that
those,
time
yeah.
as well.
Have we started having requests for the theater use? Not yet. Okay. I think once it,
I don't even know that it's available at all, even for us to schedule.
okay.
Yeah.
Because I think once it opens and people hear about it, it'd be nice to keep track of what the requests are and what the needs of whoever is requesting
Yeah.
it. And it might help us develop a policy or at least a fee schedule, like,
Yeah.
in terms of clumps of what people want.
Typically, what we do initially is we'll open it up only internally. And so any request that's going to come for the theater within that, for those first couple of months, is going to have to be an appeal to this committee to say, I know it's not on there, but they're going to have to submit something to me in an email or to Mr. Harrison or whoever else to say, we want to use the theater through an email, and then it would get passed on to say, somebody wants to use the theater for this, that, or the other, and then it would become a discussion. Because I don't think that we'll be putting it on live for anybody to schedule until we're ready for that. So all those requests for pre-public opening would have to come through an email to somebody in the district. Yeah.
Thanks.
Another item that I would like to see probably on our next agenda would be an update, if there is one, on pool use, and if we are any further with any organizations that want to rent our pool and give swimming lessons and those sorts of things, because I know it's getting late in the season, so likely nothing is going to happen until next spring or whatever, but I'd like to hear what's in the pipeline or that sort of thing. Anything else from the committee?
So I wanted to let the committee know I got a letter from the San Joaquin County Registrar of Voters, and they're going to be requesting all of our schools for the June 5th primary and the November 6th, 2018 general election. Just giving you guys a heads up.
The June primary, well, unless we have summer school at some of the campuses or whatever, that shouldn't be such an issue student-wise. The November one, we had some issues in the past of
Exactly.
not having facilities or
Just the
to
location,
accommodate them
yes.
at all the campuses because of student safety issues and that sort of thing. So that's something that we need to.
And that's why I bring it up, because I know some of the principals in the past has expressed concern about strangers, coming on campus to vote. So
Some of our facilities, like Altamont, has an exterior door for the library that we don't actually have to grant them access. But like Wickland,
Yeah.
they're in the campus,
right.
and so I'm just as civic minded as the next person, but our first obligation is to our children.
Yeah, and that has to be. So if there is something other than the library or the MPR or whatever on a campus that they can use and get in and out without,
So I think we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Typically, they request all of our schools, but as the election gets closer, they back off and only go to 2 or 3, and we could deal with those individual schools when that comes forward. So, and they could always, I think this building, they've used this building in the past too, which may be a better option.
As far as I definitely, as far as
So-
I'm concerned.
Anyways, just give us a heads up. It's coming down the pipeline 6 months or 8 months from now.
And by November, we may have some other options for them.
Perhaps, yes.
And so our next two meetings that are scheduled are December 21st and May 17th. So we've scheduled them in advance. I know,
You said December 21st. Are we going to exchange gifts?
hey,
A white elephant, a white elephant.
Let's not transition out of that.
Mr. Chairman, I need to.
Certainly. All right. Do we want to discuss potential dates for a workshop? I will defer to staff as to when how long they think it will take them to be prepared for a workshop, and then we can go from there.
since it's kind of reviewing policies, Ted Miller kind of takes the lead on those policies. I mean, we'd be involved, but I don't know if that even ties in with that or not.
The next policy committee meeting is still to be determined. I think it might be discussed at the next board meeting.
All right, well, why don't we, can we give like a week that we'd look at and maybe finalize a date of a week? What about like the week after Thanksgiving week? Is that the last week of November?
So it's the week of the 27th.
Is that what it is?
When, I apologize, I'm not sure when.
The week of November 27th,
So,
which
yeah.
is after the holiday? Things get busy, leading up to that, and we got a little gap in time
I
there.
believe the CSBA conference is that,
I think it is too, because my first interim is due to Noel on the 27th of November. So that's really early, which means she probably has the CSBA conference because the board meeting is the 6th.
yeah, I think we go from the 29th to the 2nd is when we're at CSBA.
So 28th? It's still that last weekend, it's before you go.
We could do it, I'm okay with the
28th,
28th,
28th?
What day is that? Day of the
The
week?
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yeah, that should be good.
All right, so we'll jot down the 28th and
So
get all our stuff by then.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, thank you, everyone. And since we don't really open these meetings or close them, I will call it adjourned and go from there. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just made it within the hour.